Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Eruvin Daf contains really two completely disparate sugyas. First is a continuation of what we've been discussing thus far in the parak, and that is the halacha of bitul rishus, when we allow somebody to absolve himself of his rights to a chutzner in order to allow everybody else to carry within that chutzner. As pertains to when one of the residents of the chutzner is a non-Jew, or you have two separate chutzeres, and we'll have two separate discussions within that sugya, when there is a guy there, and when there are two separate chatzeres that would like to do a bitul rishus. The Gemara then moves on to talk about when somebody has two entrances to his chatzer, one into the mavoy and one out into the valley or into a karfev. So which is his main entrance, as does he create problems for the other people who occupy that mavoy? That will be a lead-in to a totally different discussion about the halachas of karfev. Karfev is a large area which mid-oraisa is a rishus hayachid, but mid-rabbanan is a karmelis. The Gemara will want to know, does it have the chumras of being a rishus hayachid, due to the fact that mid-oraisa it is a rishus hayachid, and the Gemara will discuss that sugya at length. So the Gemara begins by saying that Rav Chizda and Rav Sheshes, whenever they met each other, they had an interesting dynamic between them. Rav Sheshes was an expert in Mishnayos. He knew all the Mishnayos backwards and forwards, and Rav Chizda's lips trembled at the thought that Rav Sheshes might ask him a contradiction between two Mishnayos, and he did not have the Mishnayos down as pat as Rav Sheshes did. On the other hand, Rav Chizda himself was very good in pilpul, in logical chains of thought and proof, and Rav Sheshes trembled entirely at the thought that he may ask him something in pilpul specifically. So there was one time that they met, and Rav Chizda asked him two questions. One of them pertains to the sugya we were just discussing, one of them pertains to the sugya we were discussing before that. So we were discussing most recently the concept of bitul rishus. Bitul rishus again means where you have two or more people with joint ownership in a chutzner. They're not allowed to carry there because Chazal consider it to be rishus harabim. Chazal gave it the halachas of rishus harabim midrabanan, unless you do an eruv chatzeros. If somebody forgets to do the eruv chatzeros, he can do what's called bitul rishus. When he remembers on Shabbos, he can nullify his rights in that chutzner, and then the other people are allowed to use the chutzner. Now we said that bitul rishus only works in certain situations. There are two factors that play into whether bitul rishus can work or not. One is if the two chutzers, the area that is under discussion has two residents that aser each other, that they must have an eruv chatzeros or else it'll be forbidden to carry there, and therefore, since this guy forgot to make an eruv chatzeros, he's making a situation where nobody's allowed to carry, as opposed to two adjoining chutzers that just want to be able to carry from one to the other, where they don't have to have an eruv chatzeros, they don't aser each other. The other situation is, does an eruv chatzeros work altogether? Now, we had seen the discussion, machlokas earlier, between Shmuel and Rav Yochanan. Can you do bitul rishus in a situation where there was no asering? The two people, residents that want to make a bitul rishus, didn't aser each other. That means that they were in two separate chatzeros. That was a machlokas. Now, Gemara now is going to ask, what happens in a situation where there is no asering and there's no eruv that could have worked? So obviously it'll only be a question, according to the Madei Yamar, that you don't have to, it's okay, you could do bitul rishus even if there's no asering. The question now is, what if there's no asering and there's no eruv? We'd seen an opinion earlier that you need to have both factors. But now the question will be, according to the opinion that you don't have to have a factor of asering, if you have two completely separate chatzeros and everybody's allowed to carry in their own, and they want to do bitul rishus so that they can carry from one to the other, the opinion that says that works, what happens if they also can't make an eruv chatzeros between them? What's the case? So Rav Chizda's first question concerned this case. He said, you have two people, each have houses or chutzers across the road from each other, across the rishus harabim from each other. And along came a group of goyim. On Shabbos, they built walls enclosing the rishus harabim between these two houses. So now they've created a chutzner that's shared by the two houses. You have a chutzner that didn't exist at the beginning of Shabbos, it exists now. They could not possibly have had asering each other at the beginning of Shabbos because the chutzner didn't exist. They cannot possibly have had a eruv chatzeros at the beginning of Shabbos because the chutzner didn't exist. It was the rishus harabim. So neither factor applies. Can they do bitul rishus now on Shabbos or not? And it's again a question only according to the Madhyamar that it's okay if they couldn't do that if they do not aser on each other in the beginning of Shabbos. So the Gemara says that Rav Chizda asked this question to Rav Sheshes, and Rav Sheshes said they cannot do Bitul Rishos. Okay, Rav Chizda's next question concerns a different discussion we had when an idol worshiper shows up in the middle of Shabbos, and the question was, can you do Schirus Rishos in the middle of Shabbos or not? Can you rent rights to use his yard or not? And then do Bitul Rishos. That means what happened over here was you had a group of Jews together in a yard with a guy who wasn't there. Then the guy showed up on Shabbos. In order to make this permitted, you had to do Schirus Rishos and Bitul Rishos. The Gemara heard earlier said that you cannot do that, at least according to one opinion. The question is, according to that opinion, you can't do Schirus Rishos and Bitul Rishos. What if you only have to do one of them? What if the guy is there but he dies on Shabbos? So now you don't have to do Schirus Rishos anymore because he's not there, but you still have to do Bitul Rishos. The Jews that are there still have to do Bitul Rishos. According to this opinion, can you do Bitul Rishos now on Shabbos? Is it only Schirus Rishos plus Bitul Rishos that you can't do on Shabbos, but Bitul Rishos you could? So Gemara says, Rav Chizda again asked this question to Rav Sheshes, and Rav Sheshes said, it's a machlokes between me and Rav Hamnuna. I say you could do Bitul Rishos according to this opinion, and Rav Hamnuna says you cannot do Bitul Rishos according to this opinion. Okay, now the Gemara quotes Rav Yehuda and Rav Shmuel, and we are discussing a situation where somebody has two entrances to his chutzner. Okay, so somebody's got a yard, it opens to a mavoi. That mavoi has other yards that open into it, and therefore you need a shetufim b'vayis to be able to carry within that mavoi. And if one of the residents is a guy, then you wouldn't be able to carry in a mavoi because shetufim b'vayis doesn't work. The thing is, the guy, or perhaps Jew, has another entrance to his chutzner. His chutzner has, besides for having an entrance to the mavoi, has an entrance out to a field or to a karfeif. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says if it's a guy, so if the guy's main entrance is the one into the mavoi, that would be a problem. Nobody can make a shetufim b'vayis here. You would have to do Schirus Rishos. The question is if his mavoi, if his field has an entrance out into the fields, if his chutzner has an entrance out into the fields, so the Gemara says that would be considered to be his main entrance, and you don't have to worry about the one that opens into the mavoi, even if he uses the one into the mavoi all the time. He still prefers his private entrance as long as it's at least a minimum of 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. It's got to be that minimum size. But once he has that, then it's that is his preferred entrance, even if he's bringing wagons and camels into the mavoi. Don't worry about it. It's not his main entrance, and that's fine. Now the question is, what happens if it's a karfeif? That means that his second entrance doesn't open to a field, it opens into a karfeif. What's a karfeif? A karfeif is a fenced-in area, but it's not made for residential use. It's not something that you can use. It's made for. It's not inhabitable. So Gemara says, so there it's less useful. It's a private entrance, but it's less useful. There's less air. It's fenced in. It's not really so functional. So is that still considered his main entrance, or do we say his main entrance is now the entrance to the mavoi, and therefore it's forbidden for anybody to make a shetufim b'vayis in that mavoi? So the Gemara says that Rabbah and Rav Yosef both say that the halacha is as follows. It depends on the size of the karfeif. If it's exactly a base sasayim, that's 5,000 square amos, or less than a base sasayim, so then it's too stuffy for the guy to consider it his main entrance, and therefore he would aser everybody else in the mavoi. If, however, it's bigger than a base sasayim, so then it is big enough for the guy to consider it his main entrance, and therefore he would not aser anybody in the mavoi. Now, if this is a Jew we're talking about, a Jew who didn't join the Shetufim B'vayis, and the question is, does he aser everybody else from carrying in that mavoi? So by him, the halacha is different. For him, exactly a base sasayim, exactly 5,000 amos, that would be, that would not be a problem. Even though we said for a guy, a base sasayim is too small, for a Jew, a base sasayim is fine, because he doesn't need to carry heavy things in Shabbos anyway. He's not schlepping big, gigantic loads in and out. He doesn't need such a big opening. He doesn't need so much air, it doesn't need such a wide space. However, if it's greater than a beis hasayim, then it's halachically a karfeif, which means he can't carry there. Chazal gave it halacha of a carmelist. It's forbidden to carry there midrabanan, even though it is fenced in on all sides. That being the case, he can't use it. If he can't use it, it's definitely not going to be his main entrance. His main entrance will be the mavoi, and then he would aser everybody else in the mavoi from being able to use it unless he joined the shetufei mavois. Now the Gemara repeats this question again. In a sense, the Gemara says that Rava Bar Chaklai asked Rav Huna, what's halacha if it's open to a karfeif? The second door opens into a karfeif, and we said if it's a beis hasayim, then it's a problem. If it's more than a beis hasayim, it is not a problem, and that again is referring to where it was a guy who lived in that chatzar. Okay, now the Gemara is going to get into the halachas of a karfeif altogether. A karfeif again is a large area, 5,000, larger than 5,000 square amas, larger than a beis hasayim, which is fenced in, but it is not residential, it's not useful, and the halacha of that was that Chazal called it a carmelis, even though it's fenced in. Mid'oiraisa, it should seem to be a reshus hayachid, but Chazal said it's a carmelis, and therefore you cannot carry within it 4 amos midrabanan, and you can't carry from reshus rabim or reshus hayachid into it, or from it into reshus rabim or reshus hayachid. So Gemara says that Rav Yochanan said that a karfeif, although it is a carmelis midrabanan, somebody who throws into it from a reshus harabim, meaning somebody who transfers from a reshus harabim into a carmelis, violates an Isser Daraisa. Why? Because Midaraisa it's a Rishus Hayachid. If he's carrying from a Rishus Harabim into that Carmelis, that's from Rishus Harabim to Rishus Hayachid. It's an Isser Daraisa. Even though Midarabon it's a Carmelis, Midaraisa it's a Rishus Hayachid. You have to keep that in mind. L'chumra. Okay? Because it's got walls. The only problem is that people don't live there, people don't use it, and therefore it is problematic. The Gemara is now going to ask on this concept from a brisa and bring a couple of resolutions to the question from the brisa. Now, what does the brisa discuss? The brisa speaks about a rock in the middle of the sea. So the sea itself is a carmelis. Midaraisa, you're allowed to carry there. Midarabanan, it is forbidden to carry within it. It has the chumras of both Rishus Harabim and Rishus Hayachid. Now, the rock that's sticking out of the sea, so the Brisa says 2 halachas. If the rock is a Rishus Hayachid Doiraisa, meaning if the rock is 4 Tvachim by 4 Tvachim, and it's 4 Tvachim, it's a 10 Tvachim high. So, it's halachically a Rishus Hayachid Midaraisa, and it's a Karmelis Midarabanon. So the Brisa says, so you're not allowed to carry from it to the sea, or from the sea to it, because the sea is a carmelis, the rock is a Rishus Hayachid. That's the first halacha in the Brisa. The second halacha is that if it's lower than 10 tefachim, so then you are allowed to carry. It's not a Rishus Hayachid if it's less than 10 tefachim high. The pashtus is that it's a carmelis. So then you are allowed to carry from the sea to the rock and from the rock to the sea. It's from a carmelis to a carmelis. Then the Brisa adds a mysterious last line. It says, how much? Up until beis hasayim, up until 5,000 square amos. The Gemara says, what does this last line mean? What is it referring to? It's referring to the first case in the Brisa or the second halacha in the Brisa. So says the Gemara, has to be referring to the first halacha in the Brisa. It would make sense. If it's referring to the second halacha in the Brisa, the second halacha said that as long as it's less than 10 tvachim high, so the rock is a carmelis, the sea is a carmelis, you can carry from one to the other. Why would we limit that? If it's 5,000 amos or larger, it's still a carmelis, so there's no reason to change that halacha. It has to be referring to the first case. The first case is said that it's a Rishus Yachid, it's 10 Tvachim high, and it's 4 by 4. So then we said that you can't carry from the rock to the sea or from the sea to the rock. And then we limited that up until 5,000 square amas, up until it is a halachic karfeif, where it becomes a carmelis midrabanan. Now that would make sense. The only time that it's forbidden to carry from the sea to the rock or vice versa is if the rock is a Rishus Hayachid, even midrabanan. But once the rock is large enough that it's a carmelis midrabanan, so now the rock is a carmelis, and the sea is a carmelis, you're allowed to carry. That makes sense, but it doesn't fit with Rebbe Yochanan, because Rebbe Yochanan said that remember that it's always a Rishus Hayachid midaraisa. As long as it's always a Rishus Hayachid midaraisa, you should not be allowed to carry from a karmelis to a rishus hayachid midaraisa. So you should not be allowed to carry from the sea to the rock and from the rock to the sea. Obviously, Rav Yochanan is wrong. And even though it's a rishus hayachid midaraisa, halachically we don't give it that status. We say that it counts as a karmelis, and you are allowed to carry from the rock to the sea and from the sea to the rock. That's Gemara's kasha. So Gemara offers two answers. Gemara's two answers are both saying that really this last halacha is going on the reisha. It is going on the first halacha. And we are limiting the halacha that you're not allowed to carry. We are limiting the reisha anyway to 5,000 square amos. According to the Gemara's first answer, which comes from Rava, we're not limiting the halacha, we're limiting the diuk, the implication which you could make from the halacha. Meaning the halacha that the Mishnah said that you're not allowed to carry from the rock to the sea, from the sea to the rock, that's true under any size, under any circumstance. It's not limited to 5,000 square amos because, like Rabbi Yochanan said, it's always a rishus hayachid midaraisa. However, the implication is that within the rock itself, you are allowed to carry. That's only true if it's small. If it's large enough that it has the halacha of a karmelis, then you can't carry within the rock itself. That's what the Mishnah is saying, only up to 5,000 square amos. Lest if it's greater than 5,000 square amos, then it's a karmelis and you can't carry within it itself, but that has nothing to do with Rabbi Yochanan's halacha. Now, Rav Ashi answers differently, and he says, no. Really, the halacha that we had said is correct. You are allowed to carry from the sea to the rock and from the rock to the sea if it's greater than 5,000 square amos, and it's not a problem on Rav Yochanan. Again, what did Rav Yochanan say? Rav Yochanan said that it has that a karfe which is greater than 5,000 square amos has a lach of rishus hayachid d'oraisa, even though it's a karfe from Rabbanan, it has a lach of rishus hayachid d'oraisa, so that if you're transferring from a rishus harabim, not from a karmelis, from a rishus harabim to that rishus hayachid, it's an isur d'oraisa. That's true. The Isur Daraisa still applies. The Daraisa status still applies. If you're going to go from Rishus Harabim to this 5,000 square amma karfe, if you'll violate an Isur Daraisa, nobody's arguing on that. What this Brisa is telling us is that if you're transferring from a karmelis to that karfe, since midoraisa there's no problem, you're going from a karmelis to a Rishus Hayachid. Karmelis to Rishus Hayachid is an Isur Darabanan. The Rabbanan in this scenario did not say you have to consider the fact that it's a Rishus Hayachid midaraisa and say you're really transferring from a karmelis to a Rishus Hayachid d'oraisa. They said, since we made a rule that this area itself, this 5,000 square amma karfe, carrying within it is forbidden because it's a karmelis, so we said ignore the fact that it's Rishus Hayachid d'oraisa as far as the halacha of carrying from the sea to the rock, from outside this area, from another karmelis into and out of this area. Ignore the fact that the Oraisa is Rishus Hayachid. Since we created the whole concept of karmelis altogether, we're allowed to make up the rules to it, and therefore we're going to say as follows. We're going to say that this karfeif, within it, if it's greater than 5,000 square amos, it's a karmelis you can't carry within it. However, carrying from outside it, from a karmelis to within it, even though the Raisa is Rishus Hayachid and you should view it as carrying from a karmelis to Rishus Hayachid, which is also the Rabbanan are going to take that Isser off. They're going to say, no, view it as a karmelis, even lekula, so that you can carry from another karmelis into it or from it to another karmelis. Why would they do that? Because if they let people look at it as Rishus Hayachid, l'chumra, they're going to end up looking at it as a Rishus Hayachid, also lekula. What would end up happening was people would get confused. You would say to them, it's really Rishus Hayachid d'oraisa, so therefore to carry from a karmelis to it is forbidden. Then people would say, 1 second, it's Rishus Hayachid d'oraisa, so then I can carry within it. Why can't I carry within it? And you would lose the halacha that Chazal said you can't carry within it because it's a karmelis d'Rabbanan. And therefore they dropped that entire halacha in order that people shouldn't carry within it because it's a karmelis d'Rabbanan. Now the Gemara asks, well, why would you keep this gzera as opposed to that gzera? Why would you want to save the gzera of people not carrying within it because it's a karmelis d'Rabbanan at the expense of people carrying from a karmelis to it? And viewing it, you want to create it, make it, as far as that's concerned, make it a karmelis d'Rabbanan lekula. Why would you want to save that? So Gemara says, simple, because carrying within it is common, and people do that all the time, and we wanted to keep that gzera. We wanted it to be viewed as a karmelis, and you can't carry 4 amas within it. Carrying from another karmelis into it, that we were willing to lose. So for that, we were willing to drop it and say, you know what, forget the fact that it's Rishus Hayachid d'oraisa. Since this whole issue is only d'Rabbanan anyway, we'll ignore that, just view it as a karmelis, simplify things, consider it a karmelis for all its halachas, and if you can't carry within it, but you could carry from another karmelis to it, and from it to another karmelis. The Gemara now moves to a different subject, which goes back to halachos erev chatzeres. The Gemara says that they want to do a bris in a certain house, and in order to do a bris, you have to have hot water. But the hot water spilled out, and therefore they wanted to bring hot water through the chatzer, through the yard. So Rabba said, go bring hot water. So Abaye said, but there's no erev chatzeres. So Rabba said, okay, we'll rely on the fact that there's a shetufim mavois on the mavoi that this chatzer opens into. Abaye said, there's no shetufim mavois either. So Rabba said, okay, so go get a guy to bring it. So Gemara says, Abaye said they wanted to ask a kash on that also, and Rav Yosef did not allow. Rav Yosef quoted Rav and said, no, when it's an issue of a derabanan, and somebody said you're allowed to do it, and getting a guy to do something for you is an issue of a derabanan, so first we do it. And then you want to ask questions later. As opposed to a deraisa, when if you have something to ask first. So now the Gemara wants to know, well, what was the question that they would have asked? And we'll pick that up on Daf Samach.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.